I wish I was with you in Berlin, maybe next year. I thank you, Johanna, and I thank all the team of the university, the Technical University of Berlin, of this opportunity to discuss with you, to share with you my thoughts and my provocation. During some months in 2017, a new and an astonishing phenomenon has emerged, taking shopping malls and consumers, shopping mall consumers by surprise. All of a sudden, thousands of young boys and girls decided to meet at some specific shopping mall and hang out there in a movement that self-denominated by them as rolezinhos. Rolê, in the language spoken by young fellows in São Paulo, of São Paulo peripheries, means simply to go out, to meet friends, to date, to expose oneself, to be seen, but the unexpected presence of those bodies in places like in those non-expected places generated literally a panic in shopping malls. Managers, but also users, as well as raised an issue in the public opinion. A sense of fear with the presence of this mob had then generated various reactions. First, mobilizing state security forces to expose and to prevent the siege, considering the local private security forces in charge of maintaining order in everyday life were not enough to maintain the order in this time. So the police and the state police was also engaged in taking out the mold from the shopping mall. Shopping center managers mobilized the judiciary system to impose extra controls and forbid those gatherings. Some mayors, because that was a movement in several cities at the same time, some mayors and city councilors proposed to create a rolezódromo, which is a special place in the outskirts of the city, prepared to receive these youth gatherings in order to prevent them to use the places that are not meant to be used in this manner. So why I have decided to introduce my talk with this example, but also I want to introduce my talk with this scene, but also with another scene, with the image which circulated in the weekend, some weeks ago, of crowds celebrating in the streets of Berlin the approval of a referendum which allows the city government, and still to be voted, to take back, expropriate, but also the meaning of taking back, thousands of social housing units sold and managed by corporate landlords. What have those scenes in common, and what is the process and the meaning behind and the logic behind those scenes? So I want to refer here to this new colonial power, which is flagless and faceless, which is seizing our territories, transforming landscapes and lives. And I could call financialized digital neoliberalism, and sorry for the long denomination, and this is not a pretension to engage in a conceptual discussion about this denomination, I just put everything together, which I think it's very meaningful today to understand what's going on. But I use here deliberately the word colonization to define a process which implies a territorial occupation in its military security size dimension, but also in terms of the exercise of sovereignty, which has, like any other colonization operation, an extractive nature. And we will get back also to that. So, more than a new form of organizing capital and economy, we are talking about a new biopolitics in its reorganization of bodies, subjectivities, and forms of political and territorial organization, which is absolutely marked by private regimes of territorial control and governance. They are there in the Brazilian shopping malls, but they are there as well in the seizing of corporate landlords of the former social housing stock in Berlin and elsewhere. The private regimes of territorial control, and they are there also by considering the control of militia in informal settlements. And unfortunately, I won't have much time to talk on that. But these private regimes of territorial control and governance, they have the only goal of generating rent, interest for global and local capital invested, increasingly very different to separate global and local. And capital is just floating freely around the globe. Not exactly the same thing with migrants. Opening new frontiers and spaces for products capable of attracting the wall of money. Yes, this mass of surplus financial capital which floats over the planet, looking where to park to generate more interest, to be bigger, to look for where to park, to generate more interest, to be bigger, to look where to park, to generate more interest, and I could go on and on and on. Yes, we are talking about several processes that occur simultaneously. Changes in the political economy of work, you're talking about Uberization in the field of work, of the role of the state and the changes in the role of the state, and the nature and forms of action of financial capital. Okay, we are talking about the new era in which social demands are tied to financial capital, financializing social rights, plus a central role of the built space of real estate in the financial circuits. Because built space, real space, is the perfect collateral for international capital, and we can discuss more during our discussions. I won't have time to develop that. Plus, a new phase of capitalism where high frequency trading, which combines digital electronic means. So yes, we are talking about a spatial temporal compression using sophisticated algorithms by which capital is mobilized and accumulated, betting on expectations of future value, in a new form, I would say, of assembly line, which disassemble and reconnects capital, concentrating more and more in fewer hands of powerful corporations and absolutely deteriorized investment funds capable of concentrating dispersed flux and dispersed extraction operations located in different parts of the world. I think Airbnb is a very good example of this different type of assembly line in which, as most of them, are the people who owns the houses that do all the job, get the house, manage, do all the job, and there is some financial capital gaining and extracting interest from it. Okay, we are talking here about those deteriorized investment uh, funds that lend into particular material landscapes. In this case, and I would take the example of housing, housing has shifted from a important social policy, from being a social policy, as an important vehicle of accumulation. And in the book Urban Welfare, I have a lot of descriptions of how it has been done through a first phase of the promotion of homeownership and mortgage, with the very intense and leadership participation of states, which clearly have blocked and closed down any other alternative. This has to be exactly why to sell a social housing stock in a city and push everybody into the market and non-protected market. So that has created the material, symbolic, and normative conditions for financial capital to submit individuals and families to indebtedness. And after the crisis, after 2008, the mortgage and financial crisis, which was provoked exactly because of that, how much now we have a new wave of financialization through rental housing. So I won't also have the time to develop that, but basically what we are seeing now, this new wave of housing financialization, it's the rise of a new type of institutional corporate landlord, usually linked to transnational financial assets management companies, that has begun to control a great number of rental houses and apartments in many cities. And these landlords' entry into the housing market was combined also in some cities or tourist destination with other dimensions of residential real estate financial complex to produce this new and toxic trend, unleashing, and once again, massive process of dispossession. And that is my entry point to our discussion. So these new trends combined with new automated landlords, Airbnb set the model, and other entry and converting of housing as safe deposit box for plutocrats and high-end houses, all of that has as effects, once more, like in the previous phase, the result was massive and is massive dispossession, displacements, a housing crisis, a housing emergency, especially, which is very broad, I would say, but is especially acute for ethnic, non-white, poor, vulnerable, and the youth. Once more, the financial logic of the operation, the bets and strategies to make sure that revenues from invested capital will increase trumps people's needs, generating a new movement of resistance. And I will get back to that. The importance of this whole process is also generating the resistance and the new social movements around the urban, which are getting more powerful over time. Again, the central role of the state generating new incentives to the entry of corporate landlords, the intervention of international cooperation agencies like the World Bank and European cooperation agencies promoting now everywhere rental housing policies is the new wave, the new mantra, the new suggestion of the consultants for to solve the housing question, which is in reality to solve the problem of financial question of the financial circuit, to again have housing as a important place to park and seize. So yes, I think there is a very important discussion on how much this process is also present in the periphery of capitalism. Yes, it is present. It is present in the same form of corporate landlords, of digital platforms, but also it is present with perhaps an even more perverse phase, which is the linkage between the informal and informality, which marks the production of housing for the majorities with finance. But again, unfortunately, I won't have time to develop that, but we can discuss that later during the discussion. But yes, we are talking again about a global process, which is global, but it's specific and different in every place. But here, I want to focus on the types and forms of struggles which are also provoked by the seizing of space. This includes, yes, classical social movements around housing or tenants unions, different types of unions, different types of housing movements, demonstrations on the streets, pressure on the parliament. Yes, but I want to raise here another dimension of these struggles and resistance, which are the strategies and imaginaries of emplacements. So, how communities reclaim, leave territories in the face of displacement, dispossession, and banishment, and against the empire of finance, defending territories for life instead of the submission to rent-seeking landscapes of entire trenches and perimeters of the city. Yes, we are talking about an urban warfare, which is fought, which is struggled, not only in the political place, but also in space. And in order to understand that, and in order to give strength to those struggles, I think we should rethink on our research methods and research methodologies. First of all, it's very important to see not only the movements of corporations and state above, but also the movements from below, and especially the entanglement and the links between the two, from above and from below, in order to understand the restructuring of space, both in terms of provoking displacements, but also generating emplacements and the tensions that are created and the struggles around the city that are created by this movement. But also, I think we need methodological and epistemological shifts in our research if we are talking, for instance, in research for housing justice. I think it's important to create a counterpoint to the dominant epistemological framework of the housing question, to challenge the definitions of the housing questions that are based on the technocratic supply side and the regulatory solution towards the recognition and the understanding of housing as segmented markets, as racialized red lines, as speculative frontiers. Housing justice is forged through insurgence, resistance, and conflict, but is also forged in our capacity to show, to demonstrate, and to understand the links between those movements. And it's very important because it's towards housing conflicts, it's towards those types of insurgencies that subordinate bodies can transform themselves into new political subjects. And by doing that, reframing housing and reframing cities in order to conceptualize them as spaces to promote and protect life. Thank you very much.